Hello, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Amanda Vinicky. Paris Schutz and Brandis Friedman have the evening off. Here's what we're looking at.
This is something that should have never happened.
We speak with advocates working with domestic violence survivors in light of the killing of 11-year-old Jayden Perkins. And how the demolition of 2 Illinois prisons might impact inmates and staff. Now to some of today's top stories. Eileen O'Neill Burke's lead over Clayton Harris in the hotly contested race for Cook County State's Attorney has dropped below 2,000 votes. That's after the Cook County Clerk and Chicago Board of Elections released the results of additional rounds of mail-in and provisional ballots that have been counted. According to the Associated Press, with 98% of votes tabulated, O'Neill Burke now leads Harris by more than 1,600 votes. That's down from a lead of just over 2,000 last night. We've got more details on our website. Chicago Park District facilities used as emergency housing for migrants are set to go back to their usual functions. The housing has been a sore point for residents upset about canceled classes and closed courts. Mayor Brandon Johnson's office says starting Saturday, migrants sheltering at Gage, Broadway Armory, Brands, Leone, and Petrowski parks will be moved as there is now enough space at non-park locations. The administration says it plans to transition residents to nearby locations so as to not disrupt services or children's schooling. Once that's done, the Park District hopes to return to regular Park District programming in time for summer, with schedules set to be online April 8th. The member of the state's prisoner review board behind the order that allowed Cortese Brand out on parole has resigned. And new within the hour, so has the board's longtime chair, Donald Shelton. Brand is accused of murdering 11-year-old Jayden Perkins and his pregnant mother in Edgewater earlier this month. He'd previously been serving a 16-year prison sentence for home invasion. Brand was released in the fall, but then sent back to prison for violating his parole terms, including for allegedly threatening Perkins' mom, who was Brand's ex. Leanne Miller conducted a hearing and drafted an order that allowed Brand's re-release. The very next day, Brand is believed to have attacked Perkins and his mom. In a statement announcing Prisoner Review Board member Leanne Miller's resignation, Governor J.B. Pritzker says it is clear the Prisoner Review Board did not give consideration to the evidence that victims of domestic violence deserve. The statement announcing Shelton's resignation made no reference to the Brand case, and we will speak soon with advocates for domestic violence victims about lessons to be learned from this situation. And up next, what is and isn't being done for survivors of domestic violence? That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Almost 2 weeks ago, 11-year-old Jayden Perkins' life was cut short. He and his pregnant mom were attacked by his mom's longtime ex-boyfriend in their North Side apartment. Perkins died while trying to protect his mother, officials said. No, the man accused of the killing, who was out on parole, had a record of violating orders of protection. He has since been charged with numerous felonies, including first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. And now at least one member of the Illinois Prisoner Review Board has resigned in connection with the case. Joining us to talk about this are Carla Altmaier, the co-founder and co-director of Healing to Action. Also, Ashley Olson, Associate Director of Ascend Justice. Thanks to each of you. Now, Carla, your organization has been working on the ground in the community since Jayden's killing. This has to be hard. I've read about him. He was a straight-A student, a good dancer, and evidently almost also just loving and brave enough that he, according to authorities, fought for his mom during this attack. So what does that community work look like?
Yeah, so a lot of the community, so Healing to Action, our organization is a grassroots organization that is survivor-led, and our mission is to build the leadership and collective power of the survivors most impacted. So what that means is we provide leadership development for survivors, but also survivors carry out grassroots campaigns in their communities. In this instance, we have survivor leaders who are connected with the issue. There's many people on the team who are affected directly. And so what that support is looking like is really connecting with parents in the community, offering healing, offering ideas and being thought partnership, and really supporting the community and centering the survivor in this instance.
And hopefully, I'm sure, going forward, helping Jayden's mother.
Yes.
As I noted, she was pregnant and had another child as well. So working with them.
Yes. Yes.
That's the hope anyway.
Yes.
We hope for her recovery. Now, Ashley is somebody who works with survivors. What is your reaction to hearing this whole situation? Various violations of orders of protection.
You know, it is both tragic and unfortunately not a unique situation. You know, we see a lot with our clients, this cycle of domestic violence, and unfortunately a cycle of systems failing victims, both in enforcing orders of protection, granting orders of protection, and so it's unfortunate that it is not unique.
That's something that I really want to drill in on here, because obviously this is a horrifying situation, but sort of what can be done about it. So let's actually, to that end, listen to part of a press conference from March 15th. That's when the charges were announced against the man who allegedly killed Perkins. And here is what Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox had to say.
There should be confidence in the criminal justice system, and that we would hope that incidences like this are rare. However rare, this is horrific. And we need to do an evaluation, particularly in this case and others, to ensure that there were no gaps in the justice system that will allow for a dangerous offender to commit the acts that he did. And as you heard the superintendent say, that there are questions, and there are questions that need to be examined and truthfully answered so that we can prevent something like this from happening in the future.
Now, Ashley, you just said that while some of the circumstances in this particular situation may be different, that this is not all that rare. What are those gaps in the system that State's Attorney Fox was referencing that allowed this to happen?
Sure. So some of them are just gaps generally in the system. A lot of it has to do with enforcement. And in the state of Illinois, there are great laws related to domestic violence. There are great things that protect survivors. Unfortunately, if they're not followed through with, if they're not enforced, if the systems that are in place to help enforce them don't have the resources that they need, whether the staffing or the education, the information about domestic violence, it's not going to work.
So, Carla, jump in here. What specifically does that mean in terms of lack of enforcement? Is this something that we're looking for police to, go after somebody? Is it the Prisoner Review Board for allowing somebody out on parole? Is it systems that don't talk to one another?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ashley and I agree that the system actually rarely works. In a report by the network in 2022, only 3% of calls from survivors to police actually resulted in arrests. And so I think all of us can agree that survivors deserve to have a community, a reliable community of support. And what that really means is that this issue of domestic violence is so individualized that it really needs to be seen and invested in as community violence. And there's actually two main problems right now with the way how the system is currently being set up. I think the first is recognizing that survivors don't have anyone to really talk to about this because it is highly individualized. So saying, okay, well, we're going to treat this as domestic, this just happens in the home, this doesn't affect the community at large, that's usually what you hear. That then makes it for the survivor to deal with it on her own or his own, and actually puts the pressure on them to fix the situation. I think when I've been talking with the parents in the community, they've been saying, we had no idea that she was going through this. She was going through this alone. And the second problem is that even if when you see the system work, you oftentimes see the system fail. So in last summer, there was a case for Karina Gonzalez, who unfortunately was also killed by her partner, and her daughter was killed after an order of protection was issued. So even when those protections are there, you're still not guaranteeing the safety of the person. And we have to think about what kind of system are we relying on when someone has been incarcerated for 16 years or longer and they're not rehabilitated back to society.
So in this situation, the governor has called for, again, as we noted, now 2 members of the Prisoner Release Review Board have resigned, at least one of them in directly connection with this case, it appears. The governor calling for domestic violence training for those members. Ashley, is that something that would help?
Yes. I mean, I think
Wouldn't hurt?
It wouldn't hurt. Does it solve the issue completely? No. But I think at all levels of the systems where victims are interacting with, education about domestic violence, what it is, how it presents itself, how we can prevent it or intervene, can only help. And I think it has to go hand in hand with, what Carla mentioned about making this is a community issue, bringing it out into the public.
Making people more aware that education, not
absolutely.
just for, but I want to get to, because the governor, this is also, of course, putting pressure on the system for fixes. This is a tragic incident that could lead to change, and in fact, the governor saying that he would support a proposed legislation if it does something to that effect, and is directing both the Department of Corrections and the PRB to review the current rules and procedures for cases involving domestic violence. So what is the issue here? Because there's been some reporting that maybe the Prisoner Review Board wasn't aware of this situation, that the judge decided to release this individual despite these violations, and this has to do with, being presumed innocent unless there's a preponderance of evidence otherwise.
I can't speak directly to what.
Of course, not the case, but what can be done?
I think, as we mentioned, bringing domestic violence to a more public-facing front, educating the folks that are in these systems are folks from our communities, and so these systems that we have to work in, they reflect our communities, and we have to, in terms of domestic violence, bring it out as a public issue, and change, I think, public perception about what it is, who can deal with it, will help. Is, I think, one part of changing and updating those systems. I don't think that there's going to be any sort of quick legislative fix, but I think a lot of these things kind of have to go hand in hand with each other.
And you wanted to weigh in here.
Yeah.
We've got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to note is that the system itself has been broken, and putting like another Band-Aid solution is just not going to actually make the system accessible. And so what we would propose is really on the short term, having a community-based approach where you have a network of support for the survivors embedded in their communities, so that if you have to find housing immediately. You can go over, have someone to call, and someone understands your situation.
And that is the sort of work that your organization does. So a place to start in the Pritzker administration. If you're looking for folks to win, we've got two. Thank you, and I'm so sorry, and good luck with the rest of your work. Now, up next, what the governor is planning for 2 state correctional facilities. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight's coverage of public safety is supported by the Su Ling Jin Charitable Foundation Initiative for Reducing Violence in Chicago.
Housing at Stateville Correctional Center is, quote, not suitable for any 21st century correctional center, and Logan Correctional Center is inefficient, ineffective, and unsuitable for any population. That's according to an independent report last year on the conditions in Illinois correctional facilities. That report helped push Governor J.B. Pritzker to announce a $900 million plan to demolish, then rebuild 2 prisons, those 2 prisons specifically. Now, joining us to talk about what that plan means for inmates as well as for prison staff are James Soto, a former inmate at Stateville for about 20 years. Also, Jennifer Volin-Katz, Executive Director of the John Howard Association, that is a prison watchdog group, and Mike Newman, Deputy Director of AFSCME Council 31, which represents corrections officers and employees. We did, by the way, reach out to the Illinois Department of Corrections, which declined to participate, but DOC did send a statement that we'll get to shortly. James, I want to start with you. Well, you were incarcerated at Stateville. You were then part of a class action lawsuit over the safety of the buildings. What were the conditions like that led to that suit?
Well, the conditions were they had poor infrastructure. I mean, literally, the ceiling would fall apart. Parts of the wall had cracks in it, and water would leak through. The water was toxic. You wake up in the morning, and it'd be really brown. It had a very putrid smell to it. It was disgusting. You couldn't drink it.
Did you get water bottles at least? Was this recognized?
We got water bottles only when there was a main pipe that had burst and they needed the part, and then they started giving us the water. But once they replaced this part, no longer were we receiving the bottled water. You had to purchase it from the commissary, and as you can imagine, not everybody can afford to buy the bottled water. So, you know, you had to consume it in some form or fashion.
And that is a lawsuit, by the way, that is still ongoing from my understanding. Now, Jenny, let's turn to you. Your group has applauded this action from the state in tearing down these 2 facilities, but critical about the second part of that plan, and that is the rebuilding. Why?
So if you look at where we are right now, just in terms of the numbers in the state of Illinois, we have excess capacity inside our prisons. We have about 30,000 people who are currently incarcerated in Illinois, and we have conservatively at least space for 42,000 people. We simply don't need all of these prisons. And many of them, as is outlined in the report you mentioned at the top of this program, are falling apart. They are decrepit, they are unsafe, they are inhumane. So I think we need to start allocating resources responsibly and sensibly, and building more prisons, pouring money into prisons that are old and decrepit is not a reasonable way to go forward in the state of Illinois.
Building new ones, then you would be able to perhaps move some of the inmates to these better facilities if the others are also decrepit?
So I would say that there are some arguments to be made that building very different kinds of facilities may have benefit in the state of Illinois. One of the things that the CGL report points out is that we don't have appropriate programming space or therapeutic space. And so conceiving of things differently might have some value, but I think we could do better by allocating resources to keeping people out of prison and meeting their needs in our communities.
And CGL, by the way, is the consultant group that formed that report. Now, Mike, let's turn to you. The union acknowledging poor conditions in these prisons, but concerned about even the temporary closure. So how do you balance those two things?
Yes, well, let me say first, when we talk about temporary closure, the administration is talking about 3 to 5 years. That's not a short-term
Not
closure.
a couple of months.
And we are concerned there are a lot of problems that arise in the meantime. We don't agree in terms of the capacity, particularly of maximum security beds, which is what Stateville has, primarily maximum security.
Looking at the overall
individuals.
prison population versus the certain types of situations, you want to,
Right.
is that what you're saying?
Yes, and many of those beds in other places are not the kind of situations you want to move people into anyway. But we're concerned that there are not enough maximum security beds now. If you close Stateville, where are those individuals going to go? What happens to staff who work in those facilities? And also, I might point out that Stateville is very close to Chicago. That proximity is very important for individuals in custody and for their families.
In order to be able to visit and to be sort of, upon release, return home?
Yes. So, especially visitation. And let me emphasize, we are not opposed to the rebuilding of these facilities. In fact, I don't think there's any group that's advocated any more strongly than we have for repairs and pushed on the poor condition of the prisons.
So what then? If you're not against the plan, what is the concern, that they won't be rebuilt, that they'll just be demolished and that's it?
No, the concern is what happens in the 3 to 5 years in between when they've been built. Where do those individuals go? We had a situation last year where overnight 300 individuals who were in custody in Stateville were moved overnight from a maximum security institution to a medium security institution at Sheridan. Sheridan Correctional Center is a program center that deals with that helps with substance abuse issues, where the individuals there want to get the treatment. It's totally,
you're saying these populations shouldn't be mixed?
Yes, it totally disrupted the whole program.
James, yeah, please go ahead. I wanted to get your reaction to these plans.
Yeah, I have to say that it's an incorrect depiction to say that everyone there is maximum security prisoners, because of the fact there's programming there, and the vast majority of them have been reclassified to be medium status, which means they are eligible to go to these medium facilities. And when they made that 300 plus move of inmates to other facilities, there was 0 incidents. There was no incidents were there. They were housed there for approximately a month or so, and there was no incidents. So I would say that if you do make a move to house these individuals into these medium facilities, that it wouldn't be that disruptive to them, only to the extent that those that are in educational programs may not be able to continue.
So you're okay with these plans then, or?
I say they should have done this years ago. I mean, this problem has been existing for the longest, and they knew about it. I was recently released in December, and I've had all my blood work drawn. I don't know what the results are, and I'm really worried that, because I know other individuals who've had high levels of lead and other toxins in their body because they consumed the water there at Stateville.
You know, I want to get to the Department of Corrections statement that reads in part that this plan fully addresses concerns at the 2 facilities facing the most serious and expensive maintenance issues, and will ensure that AFSCME members can do their jobs in modern, safe facilities. It is not fiscally responsible or feasible to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in a continuing effort to shore up facilities that have been neglected for decades and used for over a century. Now, Jenny, we've talked a lot about Stateville. What about Logan?
Logan is similarly in a state of complete disrepair. ceilings caving in, water issues. It is a coal-powered facility. It is antiquated. It is unsafe.
And for women and transgender prisoners, if I'm correct?
Yeah, Logan is the largest women's facility we have in the state of Illinois. It was a male facility up until about 2013, 2014, when they moved women over there. It is actually a mixed security classification facility, and frankly, it's always been a very challenging place because of that, but the infrastructure makes things far worse.
So what is your answer to Mike's concerns in terms of what do you do with the inmates and staff in the interim?
Yeah, well, first of all, nobody's put forward a plan as to what that looks like, and I think it is important to understand what it means to move people temporarily. Where are they going? Are staff going to follow? I think that's a legitimate concern and something we'd like to know more about. But I think we're in agreement that Stateville simply cannot exist, can continue to exist.
Agreement here,
yeah,
at least
conditions.
On a portion of that. Well, that is all the time that we have for now, but I know continued questions of the Pritzker administration about their plans you'll be asking, as will we. By the way, you can read more about James Soto's story on our website. And that is our show for this Monday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and at 10. How the end of enrollment-based budgeting could change Chicago public schools. Plus, the latest results in that neck-and-neck race for Cook County State's Attorney and more in our Spotlight Politics segment. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Amanda Vinicky. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.